What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video. And in today's video, we're going to be doing my 7th or 8th take right now of this one review, but I wanted to continue on, and that is for a movie called Uproar. Directed by Paul Middleditch and Hamish Bennett, this film stars people like Julian, Dennison, Minnie, Rhys, Darby, James Rolliston, and more. So Uproar is a film that actually premiered last year in 2023 over in Canada at a film festival, and then in October of last year actually got a full-on release in its home country of New Zealand. But now, as of today on March 15th, is going to have a limited theatrical run playing through Canada and the US of A. I actually got an early screener for this film sent to me just a few days ago. I intended to get this review up a little bit sooner, but I was caught up catching some other movies that you guys have already seen reviews for here on the channel this week. But even though today is day of release, I figured since this is the smaller film that a lot of people haven't really talked about, I feel like it would be a cool place to talk about it here on the channel. Now, going into Uproar, I knew nothing about it other than the fact that the main star of the film was Julian Dennison, who I think, like most people, I was first introduced to him in Deadpool, and I honestly don't think I've seen him in anything else since. And that's on me. I'm sure the kid has been in tons of things, but I haven't really sought out a whole lot of movies that he was a part of. So going into this, I was intrigued because not only he's in the film, but Minnie, who's an actress I've always enjoyed, as well as Rhys Darby, who I've loved ever since Yes Man. And anytime I see him in anything, even though he gives very similar performances to his previous roles, he's just always a very charming actor to see. I always found him to be pretty funny, and I'll start this off by saying that he was probably the funniest part of this movie for me in the small moments of humor that he does have. Now, this is a movie that touches on some pretty heavy subject matter, so before I get into my thoughts on the movie personally, let's touch on what this movie is all about. The movie at the center of it focuses on Josh, played by Julian Dennison, and their household, immediately we learn, is not necessarily the best. His mother's played by Minnie. She is a cleaner for the school that he attends, which is an all-boys school. His older brother was one of the star players on their rugby team, but has now been hurt and is now coaching on the team. And the father, who has passed away, is kind of looked at as a legend in this world of rugby at this school, so they kind of expect the two sons to follow suit. The one brother does, but our main character Josh, not so much. He's not necessarily super athletic, he's not super talented in that world, but his family, most notably his mom and the pressure from his school, kind of continually pushes him towards rugby, and it just kind of feels like something that he's doing. Not too long into the film, he ends up getting a connection with the teacher played by Rhys Darby, who pretty much tells him, hey man, you know, we do like this drama class thing if you kind of want to look for something new to do. Turns out he's not too bad at acting, so he falls in love with acting and drama, and ends up having this teacher kind of push him to maybe go and see if he can get accepted into a drama school and follow a passion that he actually enjoys instead of doing rugby. So that's a classic tale that we've seen in countless movies, right? A main character who's known for one thing, or everybody around them expects him to do one thing, but ultimately they find a new passion and they want to go down that route, and people in their lives, both their family, friends, and other people who don't really know them all too well, start to judge them. But that's not where this movie ends, because a huge part of this film is also the fact that it takes place in the early 80s in New Zealand, specifically during protests that were happening as apartheid and a lot of racism was going on with South Africa, and there was a whole lot of stuff going on that side of the world, and there was a whole thing called the Springbok Tour that had to do with rugby. So there's some protests that are going on in New Zealand at this time, and our main character Josh also finds himself wrapped up in all of that. So you have some heavy subject matter that this film touches on, as well as a classic coming of age and finding yourself narrative at the center of it. On one hand, what I could start this off by saying is that I thought it was a very well acted film for the most part. It's also very well shot throughout. There's a nice musical score that accompanies the film, as well as a good soundtrack of popular songs that we know, as well as cover version of certain songs that we know, some of them being in different languages. And I think that there's a great sense of community that the film also displays, as well as showcasing a lot of cultural pride for New Zealanders and the various cultures that live in that world. And so I think on all of that, this movie does a really great job with all of that. I thought that the overall production value of the film was pretty solid, and I can genuinely say that the film, you know, it has really strong merits when it comes down to the actual production element of it. Now, my favorite thing when it comes to a movie, though, is its narrative. And while I found the film to touch on some very strong themes, and I think it has a lot to say, and definitely has you thinking about things at times, I do feel like a lot of the story, personally for me, meandered and ultimately never really serviced any of those storylines. On one hand, it feels like it's about rugby, and the fact that rugby is getting in the way of our main character's journey to get into acting. At other times, it feels like the movie is more about that journey and acting. But then there's other times where it feels like the rugby and the acting portion of the film are kind of pushed to the side to more so lean into the protest element of it and our character wanting to get involved in that world, and the film having something to say about the way that it affects the everyday people who are just trying to stand up for what they believe in that world. The movie had all these strong elements that are kind of split up into three different parts: the rugby, the acting, and the protest. And by the time we got to the end of the film, while I found that there were some touching moments that do culminate all of those elements together, I ultimately found that a lot of the film for me kind of felt like it meandered. While you have strong cinematography at times, strong performances, and an overall just competently well-made film, you ultimately have a narrative that I kind of felt just never knew what it really wanted to focus on. And by the time we got to the end, and there's supposed to be a feeling of conclusion and kind of a sense of happiness with where our characters have gone, I just ultimately found myself thinking, I wanted it to like it more. I just really didn't. I think Julian Dennison as our main star here is solid throughout a lot of the film, but there are moments where the film I feel needed to be a lot more emotional, or that I felt like the movie was telling me I should feel more emotional in these scenes, and I ultimately didn't. And I don't know if that's necessarily Julian Dennison's fault or even the cast's fault at all. I think more of it has to do with the writing and the way that the story is kind of paced out, but I ultimately found myself not as invested in these characters, even when we have scenes where these characters are crying or find themselves in really emotional moments. I consistently felt this need to feel more connected than I actually was feeling connected by the film. It's a film that genuinely has a lot of the right puzzle pieces that I just genuinely think the direction of it and the overall execution of it held it back from being a great movie, in my opinion. Now, with that said, after having seen the film and seeing where it does really work in some of those really strong moments where it's touching on some of the heavy subject matter that this film touches on, or just that classic narrative of somebody finding themselves and finding their own path and journey and what they personally find happiness in life, when those moments really hit, I saw the potential of a really strong film, and a film that I think that will connect with some people. This isn't one of those movies that I can sit here and say, I didn't like it all that much, so I don't think you'll like it all that much either. It's one of those movies where I felt I wanted to connect with it more. I didn't really feel like I connected with it as much as I wanted it to, but I can totally see that there might be somebody who watches this film and does connect with it. By no means do I think this is a bad film, but by no means do I also think it's really all that good or great. It's a movie of moments. It's a movie of solid production and solid performance. It had all the right puzzle pieces to make a solid picture, but ultimately by the time the movie was over, I just never found myself rooted in the characters and their story. I never found myself really rooting for them. I never really found myself overly emotionally invested. And as I watched scenes where characters were crying with one another or standing by each other or hugging one another, I had a feeling that the film wanted me to feel more than the film was actually making me feel, and it ultimately just pulled me back from feeling like I really ultimately could say that I enjoyed this film, and I can't really put myself in a place where I give it a thumbs up and tell my viewers to go and check out the movie. So that's going to be my thoughts on Uproar, just pure, honest, genuine thoughts. Like I said, I think it's got a lot of the right pieces. It just ultimately didn't land for me, but I look forward to hearing what people have to say about this. So if you're like me and you saw the film and you didn't really enjoy it, let me know down below what didn't work for you, what did work for you. But if you came to this review because you saw the movie and you actually really enjoyed it and you have a lot of differing opinions from me, leave some comments down below. Let me know where you think I'm wrong here. And, I look forward to the discussion on the difference of opinions on this film. Did you find Uproar to be a powerful film narratively, or were you like me and felt like it just needed a little bit more to make it really land in those strong moments? I definitely can't wait to hear what you guys have to say, so hit that like button, comment your thoughts, subscribe for more videos, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.